Christopher Bell three-peats. Was this a good race at Phoenix? And unfortunately, Katherine Legge became the story on Sunday. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. So on Saturday, I posted a video of the finish between Aric Almirola and Alex Bowman, and I think I let my own personal dislike of Aric Almirola come through a little bit too much. It was a little bit too personal. It wasn't very fun, and that's not what I want to do here. I typically come into these unbiased. I just want to talk about the race that happened, and honestly, most weekends, I don't care who wins the race. I just want to see a good race and have some good storylines that come out of it, so we all have something to talk about during the week. And unfortunately, my own dislike of Aric Almirola kind of just carried through a little bit too much there. So my bad if you thought I was a little bit over the top. I get it. Now, let's talk about what happened on Sunday in the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix, because we were treated to one, Christopher Bell's three-peat. Somebody call Pat Riley, get him on the horn, because he's owed royalties from the C-Bell camp here. But also, we had really intriguing tire strategy, a really, really good finish, and ultimately a race that I actually enjoyed for Phoenix, which is kind of unheard of at this point. It's like me saying I like Lord of the Rings. Sorry, no offense if you like Lord of the Rings. They're a great movie to put me to sleep because it's super boring. Typically, Phoenix, bit of a snoozer, not on Sunday. It was actually really, really good. So from the start here, I'm going to give this race an 81. I thought this race was good. I thought this race by Gen 7 standards at Phoenix was actually really enjoyable. I still think there's a better version of it out there somewhere. It's a lot like when you watch a reboot of a TV show, you're like, it's good, I like it, but I know there's a better version out here. It's like watching the UFL. It's football. It's not necessarily great. I know there's a better version, but for now, it works, right? It's something to watch. I'm never watching the UFL, never have. You're not going to convince me to sit down and watch that. Kellen Mond, is that the kid's name? I don't know who these people are. Sorry, that's a bit of a tirade. I enjoyed this race. I'm interested to see what other people are going to rate it as, because ultimately, start to finish, I was really intrigued by this race. Not only the on-track action, but also the tire strategy that was coming along with it. And it's one of those races where I was like, man, I really wish we didn't have stages, because it would be really interesting to see how all of this played out. And we had tons of natural cautions anyways that kind of, would have negated the need for having those stage breaks. But this race gets started off. You got Katherine Legge having a solo spin there on lap 4, brings out the first caution today. That's fine, right? Okay, she's a rookie. We get it. First one in the NASCAR Cup Series since 2018. Drivers have solo spins in NASCAR all the time. Brush it off. We're going to move on from it. Unfortunately, she's going to become a story later in this race. Then you have an incident where it's just kind of an accordion effect, where Todd Gilliland gets hip checked. He gets hit into the 47 Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Stenhouse spins out. And we got our second caution before lap 10. It's like, all right, Phoenix, is this what we're doing today? We've decided to just be the crazy Phoenix this year, or the crazy race early in the season. We're going to have a lot of cautions. It kind of settled down a little bit from there. We also had Joey Logano getting nabbed for a restart violation, where he crossed over that yellow line before the start-finish line to dive down into the dogleg section there. And I saw some people on the internet were like, man, this is NASCAR being really nitpicky. The booth kind of called it nitpicky. Logano not happy. He's like, man, if it happened, it was only by a foot. Listen, rules are rules. If you want him to call it at 10 feet, you got to have him call it at 1 foot as well. Every week we have people being like, NASCAR is inconsistent. NASCAR doesn't follow their own rules. They're just making them up as they go. They follow a rule and everybody's like, that's too nitpicky. What are you doing? It's like, ugh. What does everybody want here? Do you want them to call the rules? Do you want them to not call the rules, but only call the rules on certain people? I don't understand what people want, but he clearly crossed the line. Even if it was right by the start-finish line, it's still a restart violation. He has to do a pass-through, does not go a lap down, which would ultimately be really good for him. But we also got our first look at the option tire in stage number 1. Ryan Preece puts those tires on, drives from 33rd all the way up to finish 3rd in stage number 1, which is won by William Byron. And let me just say this, Fox didn't really know how to denote the tires on the broadcast. On the scoring pylon in stage 1, when only Ryan Preece had him on, his name was highlighted in red. Okay, that actually makes sense. It's a red sidewall tire. We'll just put everybody's name in red that has it. But then when multiple drivers had them on to start stage number 2, nobody's name was in red highlight. Instead, they all had OPT next to their names on the pylon. And it felt like Fox was just testing all this out in real time. Because then we lost the OPT, and then when only one car had the option tires on, then their name was highlighted in red again. And it's like, are we testing this in real time right now? Do you guys want feedback? Because honestly, I don't care. You can highlight it in red. That's fine. You can put OPT. I don't care. I just want to know who has what tires on. And yeah, I felt like that's something that probably should have been tested earlier in the week or during rehearsal. But again, I understand that it's not something NASCAR typically does, having two different tire compounds, but be prepared. Right? I mean, come on, Artie. What are we doing here? So we'll see how it goes. If we do this again at some point this year with two different tire compounds, we'll see how all of it plays out. Austin Cindric in stage number 2 had those softer option tires on. He managed to drive all the way up to the lead in a race that Kyle Busch says that he shouldn't have been racing in. Actually, a number of drivers, I think, tend to agree with Kyle Busch on that Cindric should have been suspended. But hey, he wasn't. He was out there racing on Sunday. Didn't get a good finish out of it. Finished 19th at the end of the day. No Penske cars in the top 10, which means that when we come back for the fall, it's going to be a Penske 1, 2, 3, probably. Or 4 with Josh Berry, because he had a really good day as well. Michael McDowell in stage number 2 also goes down into turn 3, locks it up, and blows a right rear tire. Okay, brings out the caution, which I think he made contact with the wall, and I think NASCAR was like, we're not sure what's happening here. Kind of understood that one. That was just a precursor for how bad Spire's day was about to get, because on the ensuing restart, I don't know if the Ty Gibbs-Justin Haley feud from the Clash kind of carried over onto Sunday or not, but they were down low on the apron, and then it kind of just accordion effect all the way up the racetrack, and it culminated in Chase Briscoe getting hip checked into the 4 of Noah Gragson, Briscoe kind of popping up in the air, and then the big one happening at Phoenix. You had Cole Custer getting caught up in it, Riley Herbst, Shane Van Gisbergen, the 77 of Carson Hocevar, the 7 of Justin Haley. There were a lot of cars that got caught up in this, and a lot of guys that needed to have good runs ultimately ended up not having good runs because of this, and it's unfortunate for them, but Phoenix had a big one. Who would have expected that to happen? But we'll see kind of what comes out of that. A lot of guys are just going to need points now, including Ty Gibbs, who we'll talk about later. Just abysmal start to the season for him. Then we see Joey Logano put that option tire back on because he needs to get his track position back. He drives all the way up to the lead in stage number 2, and it's like, all right, damn, those tires are actually really, really good. But then Christopher Bell reeled him back in. Bell ends up winning stage number 2, and that's kind of where we're at with this. It's like the tires are really good. The option tires actually lasted longer than I think people expect them to. And the fall off wasn't super dramatic in the sense of like Bristol, spring last year, where all of a sudden it was just like flip of a switch and your tires are just done. You would start to lose a little bit, but if you could manage them, you could make them last for a decently long time. Unfortunately, that kind of brings us up to what will be probably a story throughout the week, and that is on lap 215. Katherine Legge spins out as she's getting put a 5th lap down. Josh Berry passes her, and Berry's in 4th at that point. Daniel Suarez is about to pass her. She spins out as Josh Berry's passing her, and then collects Daniel Suarez, who was in the top 5, probably on pace for a top 10 finish. Desperately needed a good run after his DNF last weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And now we're going to have to talk about whether or not Katherine Legge should have been in the NASCAR Cup Series race, how she wasn't qualified, this and that. We'll get to that in a little bit later on, but that's just the unfortunate part there. Bubba Wallace, we saw him blow a rotor getting off into turn number 1. He gets into the outside wall, not smoking the wall like he did at Pocono a few years ago when he was driving the 43 car, but still a pretty hard hit. He was actually really level-headed and had a good outlook on it after when he got out of the infield care center, and he was like, yeah, that sucked. We're going to come back next week at Vegas. I'm not going to let this affect me. We're going to do better there. I thought that was actually good veteran leadership from Bubba Wallace, and he's off to a much better start this season than he was last year, points-wise and everything, so I think he's in a good place right now. Ryan Blaney, throughout the latter half of this race, was complaining that his car felt down on power. And then, in the words of David Hobbs, it went kablamo, finally, there with 22 laps to go, and brings out the caution. All right, that kind of sets things up a little bit here, and everybody's going, and then we have another caution. So that sets up another restart. And hey, at this point, everybody has now used up their option tire, so we're all kind of just back to square one, running the primary tire here at the end of the race. But then we have another caution late in the going here. Ty Gibbs blows a tire rotor going off into turn 3, smacks the wall. I think Ty Gibbs just does not like Phoenix whatsoever. I'll always feel it's the same way when Kyle Petty went back to New Hampshire. I'll always feel bad for Ty, like just on a personal level, just because I know he probably doesn't like being at Phoenix. There's too many bad memories that come along with it. Yeah, he won a Xfinity Series championship there. It's also the same place he lost his dad. So anytime I see Ty Gibbs have a bad run at Phoenix, I just think, man, this probably just compounds it, because I know he probably just doesn't want to be there anyways, because it probably brings back bad memories in a sense. blows a tire there, goes off into the wall. Not ideal. It's just an abysmal start to the season for him, like the Carolina Panthers last season. Just hopefully something can turn it around for him, because he just watched his crew chief finish second with Denny Hamlin and a photo finish with Christopher Bell. There's a 3-lap shootout there at the end of the race. Bell and Hamlin side by side. Bell ends up beating him to the start-finish line for that win, his third in a row, second closest finish ever for the NASCAR Cup Series at Phoenix. And it felt like, hey, if they kind of washed out the track, Kyle Larson was there to steal this race quietly. Kyle Larson runs P3. Josh Berry comes home P4. The first time since 2021, the Wood brothers have started in the top 5 and finished in the top 5. Their first ever top 5 at Phoenix. Really good run for Josh Berry and that team. I'm starting to think that it wasn't the cars over at WBR the last couple of seasons. I think Josh Berry is going to put those guys and girls over at the Wood Brothers in a really good spot throughout this year, especially on short tracks and tracks like Phoenix. So, hey, I wouldn't honestly be shocked to see him win a race at this point. He had race-winning speed at times on Sunday. Overall, I thought this was a really, really strong race. You had Zane Smith coming home P9 in this race as well. Chris Buescher, P5. All 4 Hendrick cars in the top 10. So a good mix of different drivers, but I think everybody's kind of just walking on eggshells a little bit, knowing that when we come back here in Phoenix in the fall, one, we're going to have a different tire probably, or at least everybody's going to be running that soft tire, depending on what they see at the tire test on Monday. But also, what's Penske going to do when we get back here in the fall? So we'll see how all of that goes. Today's video is sponsored by Driven Sunglasses. I wear Driven sunglasses every single day. I wear the Camber sunglasses every day. If you saw me in Daytona, those are the sunglasses I had on every single day. The classics also, I've got like 4 or 5 pairs of these around my house. I wear them on every dog walk, every time I go outside. They're phenomenal. Head over to drivensunglasses.com today. Use code BRAKEHARD at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. So 2 things can be true at the same time. Katherine Legge is a really good race car driver, and Katherine Legge was likely in over her head during the NASCAR Cup Series race at Phoenix on Sunday. Katherine Legge, all around badass race car driver, multi-time winner in the IMSA series, has tons of experience in various different cars and various different series around the planet. She's accomplished more in her motorsports career than I have, than you have, than anybody has that's watching this outside of, like, I don't know, current Cup driver or Xfinity driver or something like that. She's a really good race car driver. At the same time, she was definitely in over her head this weekend in the Cup race. She qualifies last, expected, right? But she wasn't that far off of Cody Ware. But then in the race, she was pretty far off. She spins out by herself, solo at the beginning of the race, then spins out later, again, by herself, just getting tight underneath Josh Berry, and then collects Daniel Suarez, which is really unfortunate because Suarez gets taken out by a person that probably shouldn't have been in this race if NASCAR had a proper licensing system for the NASCAR Cup Series. But at the same time, when I think that probably Katherine Legge maybe shouldn't have been here, Mike Walls also shouldn't have been here. I know that side of the internet's going to be like, oh, Mike Walls definitely should be able to run NASCAR. No, he shouldn't. He's 65 years old. He hasn't raced in the Cup Series in 10 years. He shouldn't just be given an automatic pass to race in the Cup Series because he's raced here in the past. That's dumb. That's stupid. You need to have a licensing program at this point, I think, because this is top tier of, stock car racing in the world. You shouldn't just be able to waltz right in, hop in, and have a guaranteed spot in this race or in any of these races, because you can ultimately affect the outcome of a championship because of your lack of experience. And now, like I said, I think Katherine Legge is good for the sport. I don't think anybody's propping her up to be like the next big woman in the sport. I think that it was just like, hey, let's get her first NASCAR Cup Series start, which I think is fine. Unfortunately, she became the story, and you can't become the story when you're running last. And that's what happened for her on Sunday. So I hope NASCAR kind of takes a look maybe a little bit deeper at maybe having a proper licensing system for the Cup Series into the future. She does have a lot of relevant racing experience over the last few years. She was in the Indianapolis 500 last year. By no means did I think that she was going to be an issue on the racetrack. And ultimately, it wasn't because she made contact with somebody else. She spun out in front of somebody and just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, which sucks, right? It's a short track. There's probably going to be somebody there. I say short track. Phoenix isn't really a short track. I actually hate that I said that a little bit. So, yeah, unfortunate. I was hoping that she wasn't going to be the story because, again, I think she's very talented, but she was a story. So maybe she needs to do some more stuff in the Xfinity Series before, she gets that Cup Series ride again. And I think that's something NASCAR should look at going forward, is how many starts you've had in the Xfinity Series, how many starts on a relevant racetrack, like the one that you're looking to make your Cup debut on, do you have, and stuff like that. Unfortunate situation, but hopefully it's something that everybody can maybe learn by and go forward. Again, I think she's really talented. I think NASCAR does a pretty good job of looking over, especially with their comp committee, but I would like to see, kind of not a full-blown super license system here like the Formula One has for their side of things, but at least a licensing program that's a little bit stricter than it is now. So let me know in the comments what you thought about the race, what you're going to rate it as. Katherine Legge, like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHardBlog.